Haunting this list, and at number 10 we have the Old Vicarage. Borgvattnet is a small village in northern Sweden that is renowned for having one of the most haunted houses in the country. Many people to have claimed to have witnessed paranormal beings roaming the hallways or sitting at the end of the bed watching people as they sleep. I mean, for me, yeah, no thanks. There's another report of a person being thrown out of his chair regularly by an unseen force. Right now, if you dare, you can sleep over in this house and you'll receive an overnight stay certificate to prove it. Because if you guys don't have that certificate, I'm not gonna believe you ever did it. Scaring us in at number 9 is the Banff Springs Hotel. This hotel is located in Alberta, Canada, and it was built over 125 years ago, but don't let this picturesque view fool you. It is rumored to be one of the most haunted houses in the country. There have been terrifying reports of seeing a bride falling down the staircase or breaking her neck after panicking when her dress caught on fire. There are also reports from many people claiming to see a family who was murdered in this hotel. Sending chills down our spine, like literally, at number 8 is the Eastern States Penitentiary. Built in 1829, this former prison in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is known for being the first prison of its kind to introduce solitary confinement. Because of this, many prisoners were driven to insanity. As a result, solitary confinement was abolished in that prison. But since then, there have been many reports of shadowy figures roaming the cells, ghostly faces, strange sounds of footsteps, whispering. Oh my god, I just heard like some footsteps right now. And there's banging on cell doors as well. There have been many reports of an evil crackling and dark figures in the guard tower. What's even more scary than that is the Waverly Hills Sanatorium, which comes into this haunted list at number 7. This building originally served as a tuberculosis hospital throughout the early to mid 20th century. It is estimated that about 63,000 patients died there, and the death toll was a result of a mistreatment and questionable experimental procedures done on the patients. Many ghost investigators have been to this building, and they have reported seeing full body apparitions, creepy shadows, screams in empty rooms, footsteps, and sudden cold spots. Next up on this scary list at number 6 we have the Tower of London. This place has a history of torture and executions that date back over 900 years. There have been many reports of paranormal sightings at the Tower of London over the years, but one of the most infamous sightings is Anne Boleyn, who was the wife of King Henry VIII. She was beheaded back in 1536, and her headless body has been seen walking around the corridors. There are also reports of sighting 2 children wearing nightgowns, holding hands and looking terrified. Apparently one day they just vanished, and it was assumed that they were murdered by their uncle. They were deemed illegitimate by the parliament. So now their spirits roam this haunted place. Number 5 is the Monte Cristo Homestead. This super scary house is considered to be one of the most haunted locations in all of Australia. So down under, it was built in 1885, and from that moment on, there have been a lot of tragic events that occurred on the property. The family that owned it witnessed many deaths, including a tragic incident of a young child who died when they were dropped down the stairs. Also, a maid died when she fell from the balcony, and a stable boy burned to death. There was also a mentally ill man who was chained up to a caretaker's cottage for 40 years, and he was found curled up next to his dead mother's body. Number 4 brings us to Ancient Ram Inn. This house was built in 1145, and it was believed to be one of the most haunted houses in the entire British Isles. Apparently, there was a lot of child sacrifices, devil worship, and evil spirits that are behind this terrifying hauntings. When this house was used as a bed and breakfast, people would often flee in the middle of the night because they saw ghosts, had the feeling of being touched or pulled, they heard voices, or just felt an evil presence. Now at number 3 is Fort George in Nova Scotia, Canada. This location has had hundreds of reports of ghost sightings over the years. A little girl is said to follow the groups taking part in a ghost tours, with group members often experiencing her holding their hands. Other reports include strange voices, unexplained bangs and knocks, mists captured on film, the feeling of being watched, the sudden feeling of nausea, sudden gusts of wind in closed rooms, which is like, how is that even possible, furniture moving, doors banging, and on occasion people have been pushed down by the unseen force. Number 2 brings us to Franklin Castle in Cleveland, Ohio. For years, there has been countless stories of doors that have exploded off their hinges, lights that spun around on their own, electrical circuits that behaved erratically, and unexplained sounds of a baby crying, a woman woman in black who's been spotted staring out into a small window in front of her tower room. There has been many murders and diabolical events that have occurred in the house, and that is why it is so damn haunted. Finally, number 1, we have the Amityville house. On November 13th, 1974, the estate was the scene of a mass murder. Using a rifle, 23-year-old Ronald J. Deffield Jr. murdered his entire family while they were asleep, which included his parents and 4 siblings. 13 months later, the Lutz family purchased the home at a drastically reduced price because of the murders. But they only lasted 28 days before leaving it. Apparently the family claimed to smell strange odors, and they saw green slime oozing out of the walls and keyholes, and experienced cold spots in certain areas of the house. They also claimed to have been woken up, levitating off their beds, and waking up repeatedly at 3:15 a.m. every morning, which was around the time that Ron Deffield carried out his murder.
At number 10, we have a UK family home. So Nye 75 was just a child when her family moved from the US to the UK. In the UK, the family bought an old house. Like, still had lead pipes for water type of old. So they were only 6, but they do remember their experiences. They saw bright lights in the corner of rooms at night, and they heard footsteps on floorboards, even though they had carpeted flooring. Nye 75 would be woken up by a little girl at night that danced on their dresser. They themselves were terrified. Now, they had workmen working on the house to update it that had odd experiences too. They had tools being moved and the feeling of being watched. The scariest event at the house was when Nye 75's sister's friend came over for a sleepover. She woke the whole house screaming, saying a little girl came into her room and pulled her from her bed. She refused to ever come back. Nye 75 said they fixed the problem by acknowledging the ghosts and treating them like family. Just kind of walking in and being, "Hello, how are you all doing today?" to an empty house. Just like I do. At number 9, Shadows Through Doors. So this story comes from Denholm 2. When they were around 9 or 10 years old, they lived with their dad in an old house. It was a large house from the 1800s. Every once in a while they would hear footsteps or voices, and one night it got even scarier. Only they and their dad was home, and they woke up to the door of their room just wide open. And it wasn't usually open, they kept it just fully shut. So they shifted their attention to the end of their bed and saw a large shadow-like figure watching them from the end of the bed. It was around 7 feet tall. Now, they say when the figure noticed them seeing it, it melted into the floor and the door slammed shut. They, after this, felt traumatized. Now, when they asked their dad if he went into their room, cause maybe this could be a trick of the light, he denied it. They said their dad is not a man for jokes too. Number 8, the maid of the house. So this next one is from Reddit user Twigsnapper's uncle. So the uncle's house was supposedly haunted by the stableman and maid of the family that used to own it. The uncle had a friend, and the friend of that friend stay over one time. The friend of a friend saw a maid bringing towels downstairs when she was waking up, and then again bringing a percolator down. So at that point, she was just impressed by the uncle hiring staff, as he was a neurologist with a habit of spending just a little extra. But then when she went downstairs to see the uncle and friend chatting at the table, she asked where the maid was. She figured the maid was just making breakfast, but after the uncle figured out who she was talking about, he pointed out a picture. She said, "That was the maid, like that's the picture, where is she?" And he laughed and said that she had been dead for 100 years. That was the maid that haunted the house. On to number 7, a scary experience with a friendly ghost. So back when user Toenail Collector was a teen, their family was remodeling an old house. They were working on their truck that was only supported by a jack at the time, which they point out is not smart. At the moment they had no reason to get out from under the vehicle, but they suddenly felt an overwhelming urge to get out from under it. Barely a moment passed after they moved out from under it, and the jack slipped and the truck fell to the ground. If they were still under the truck, bad news. So it freaked out their dad since he thought they were under it, but the haunting part comes from their mom's reaction. They told her, and she just started weeping, since the previous owner had died in the driveway. So maybe the mysterious force that made them feel like they needed to leave underneath the truck was the previous owner. On to number 6, a knock upon the door. Redditor Weathercrow said they had a bunch of different experiences, but I'll stick to one story they said. Weathercrow said they had a reoccurring incident. They kept hearing voices of family members that just weren't home. So this could be in the form of hearing their parents fighting, or their brother and their parents fighting, but it would always be on a different floor from them, downstairs when they were upstairs and vice versa. They had one experience where it happened on the same floor and it was very close to them. They were brushing their teeth with the bathroom door shut. There was a knock on the door and their dad saying their name in a teasing voice. But they opened the door and he wasn't there. Plus they went to talk to their mom and she said he had gone to work hours ago. Then right after they shut the door they heard more knocking and didn't open the door again, which is good for them, because I wouldn't. That's just creepy. Number 5. Haunted college house. So Munchies lived in an old haunted college house that was so creepy that everyone moved out except them and one roommate. He had quite the highlight reel of experiences there. He only ever had sleep paralysis in that house of anywhere he had ever slept. Plus, if something happened, it would smell like strong, flowery, old lady style perfume if it was a strange experience. And then he had 2 different experiences at 3 a.m. First, he woke up at 3 a.m. because his roommate's door kept opening and slamming shut, and he yelled at his roommate to stop it, and it did. But he remembered he was the only one home that weekend. So who was making the noise? Who knows? Then the beads he had hanging outside his door began to swing violently but synchronized against his doorframe. At that point, he just curled up into fetal position until it stopped about half an hour later. Then the next time he woke up at 3 a.m., it was because he heard someone playing Nintendo really loud. Thinking it was another college kid playing on their Nintendo system who just broke in, he took a bat and walked towards where the Nintendo was kept in the house. It kept getting louder and louder as he approached. Once he opened the door to that room, it was completely quiet. Even though, moments ago, it was loud enough to wake him up. But let's move on. Number 4. T-Ghost. In Reddit user Signal Fire's house in New Jersey, they had their own 3 a.m. experience. They woke up at 3 a.m. after falling asleep on their couch. They could hear a noise getting louder and louder. They turned to see their kettle boiling all on its own. They said their kettle has a button that you push down and it glows blue, and they could see that the button had been pressed. But they didn't do it, and they didn't live with anyone else. With it being the middle of the night, when you may have a foggy head, they said out loud, "But I don't want tea or coffee." And then the kettle just clicked right off. And then right after, they wrote that they felt guilty as if it was a friendly ghost making an offer and they just refused it. Which I would feel the same. So this happened again during the day with a friend present, and Signal Fire felt relieved it wasn't all in their head. And then again later at night, the kettle went off around 4 a.m. and they yelled out, "Please stop boiling the kettle, we have people asleep upstairs," and it clicked off again. And at this point they say, okay, maybe it's a coincidence the kettle is a bit off, but with it happening 3 times, do you really think so? Let's move to number 3, what's in the attic. So Redditor economy_cactus refused to go upstairs in their house by the time they were about 8. They were exploring the attic-like closets that were up there with a friend when they were young, when they had kind of a creepy experience. They were crawling across the space and they saw a blonde girl sitting in the corner. They said she seemed friendly, silent, and she was wearing a nice dress. But they said they were beyond terrified and left the closet. After that experience, they avoided the closets, but every once in a while, lost toys would turn up in there. The doors would swing open if they went up to grab something, and it just kind of creeped them out. They tried to take their dog up there once to take on the monster, and the dog just didn't want to go. So when they moved out, when they were about 10, it was less than a week before the next family that moved in called. They asked the family if that house was haunted because their daughter was saying that she plays with a blonde-haired girl at night. Just like the one they described. Number 2, what's in the corner? So Finn Cobb's wife and him moved into their great-aunt's old home that was built in the 50s. There were some strange and creepy things happening for a bit, but nothing totally untowards. Then, after his aunt passed away, things started getting more strange. His son would wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning crying. The cat would go into his room and stare at the top corner of his wall. The dogs would growl outside the door. And yes, this is not too off, but then it got worse. They were watching their nephew and he was in their son's room, giggling. The nephew was pointing at the same top corner and just creepy giggling. Then his son began to say things like, "I don't want to go to bed, he gets mad," or "the shadow went over there." And at that point, Finn Cobb was feeling more and more of a presence he couldn't really explain. Then he was woken up 4 nights in a row by his fire alarm going off at 3:01 a.m. And it would only go off for 3 times and then stop. And then shortly after all this, they were creeped out enough that they moved to another house and they were all sleeping better at that point. Last but not least, number 1, Mr. Longneck. So Ambren on Reddit lives in a house that was built in the 20s. Her toddler daughter began pointing out the actions of a figure she saw in 2017. In the first instance, her daughter was 2 and pointed across the room asking who that guy was. Her daughter said he was hiding, but there was no one there. But again and again, this figure popped up in a conversation over the next couple months, but it was kind of more so joked about as that guy. But then in early 2018, around sleep time, another figure was possibly brought into play. While her daughter was about to go to sleep beside her mom, she said, "It's just me and you and him and her." And so not only that guy, him, but also her. Who's her? But then, moving on in the timeline, a name was said. Mr. Longneck. And so the daughter had a fixation with necks because she was about 2 or 3 and some people do that, so that may have been a factor, but Ambren decided she would ask some more questions about Mr. Longneck, figure out some details about what her daughter was talking about. So here it is. He is a grown-up, he is nice but scary and wears a monster clothes and a hat. He comes to the house in the afternoon, he knocks on the patio door and walks through the kitchen. Sometimes he brings a friend, the her from earlier, a little girl with yellow hair. Whenever Ambrin's daughter talks about it, she isn't scared, but the family has saged the house just in case, because if you try to imagine a figure with just a long neck, it can kind of come across really creepy when they've been hanging out with your toddler daughter for a while.
Getting us scared in at number 10 is John Soden and his house in Los Angeles. It's time to brace yourselves because this story is pretty dark. Back on January 15th, 1947, a woman's body was found on this lot. Her murder became one of the most reported murders of the time because of the gruesome way in which her body had been found. She was surgically cut in half from the waist down, washed, cleaned, and posed by her killer. Residents who have since lived there have reported hearing strange noises, such as the dragging of heavy chains, heavy footsteps, and voices calling their name. It's actually a really nice looking house, but it is full of negative energy, and it is also believed that anyone who steps foot in this house will be cursed. So, you know what? I'm good at just admiring the architecture from like Google Maps. I don't even have to see it in real life. The Queen Mary ship creeps onto this list at number 9. I had to include this one on this list because people technically did live on this ship, and it is referred to as one of the most haunted ships in America. It was operated since the 1930s, but now it is permanently docked in Long Beach, California, and it is used as a hotel. As nice as this might sound, while guests on board will often experience sleepless nights, there have been a bunch of scary paranormal activities reported on this ship. Guests will say that they will hear creepy kid laughter in the middle of the night, or things will be flown across the room. And room B340 has been taken out of rotation after there's been numerous violent poltergeist activities. It's actually impossible to keep someone in that room for the entire night because they will just get scared away. For me, I would probably last a minute. Probably not even that long. Up next, number 8, we have the Stanley Warehouse. This is a notorious haunted house that has a long reputation of being one of the most haunted places in Orange County. One of the most talked about frightening ghosts that live here is the previous owner. During her golden years, she was unable to climb up the stairs, so after her death, she is known to appear in spirit on the staircase, blocking others from going up. Visitors have reported that they found it difficult or even impossible to get past her and go up the stairs. Oh, and let's not forget about the spirit of an old man who you can hear whispering nasty and offensive things while you sleep. And if you visit the house, you will be able to hear a baby crying upstairs, but when you go into the nursery, no one is there. That would freak me out. I think I would want to visit this house just to see if I can make it upstairs, but you'll never convince me to sleep there. I mean, I just value my life way too much, and I gotta find out what happens next on Bachelor in Paradise. Moving into number 7, we have the Battery Point Lighthouse. This is an iconic lighthouse located in Crescent City, California, and it was built back in 1856. There has been numerous reports of strange and creepy occurrences happening there. Lighthouse workers and guests say that they have heard what sounded like someone wearing large boots stomping around. There have also been reports of items moving, cold spots, and the feeling that someone was touching them when no one was even there. Apparently there are 3 ghosts that haunt this lighthouse, because you know, one just isn't enough. No one seems to know who they are or why they are haunting this place. All I know for sure is that we should just board up the place and just leave it alone, just forget about it. Every now and again a visitor will feel someone tapping on their shoulder, or furniture will move by itself. I mean, that is definitely not okay, and definitely you don't want to be there on a stormy night. Bad things are said to happen there when it rains. The Whaley House haunts us in at number 6. This house was built on an old site where the public executions used to occur. So yeah, I would say this place is pretty damn haunted. Over the years, many descendants of the Whaley family lived and died in that house, and when the house was being restored, workers and visitors began to notice strange and mysterious sounds, sightings, smells, and encounters. A lot of people reported hearing scary noises and loud footsteps that left footprints. You can actually visit this house and take a tour, but I'd rather not. I'd rather spend my time at Disneyland, you know, where I know it's 100% safe. and not too scary, or is it? This place is littered with scary ghosts, and a lot of unsettling things have happened there. I'm getting the chills just thinking about it, so I gotta move on. Let's move on, let's see what we have next. Well, you know what? The red house jumps into number 5 next on our list. This is an old abandoned house that is occupied by a vengeful spirit. Back in the beginning of the 20th century, an engaged couple used to live here. Well, on the night before their wedding, they had a huge fight, and the man pushed his fiancée down the stairs. She died, and he buried her in the backyard. Well, today, she has been seen haunting the house and nearby businesses. People have reported that she is wearing her wedding dress that is covered in blood. Is it her own blood? And local legends say that if you step in front of her, she'll rush forward and drag you to her gravesite, and you will never be seen again. Okay, I don't think I'm going to be visiting this creepy thing anytime soon, or any of these haunted houses on this list. I'm just not brave enough. Like I told you, I hear wind and I run. I see something just a bit bigger than a chihuahua and I run. Okay, the Glen Tavern Inn creeps us in at number 4. This house was built in 1911, but don't be fooled by its beautiful exterior. This house has a very ugly past. Back during the Prohibition, they converted the 3rd floor into a speakeasy, brothel, and gambling den. And one of the most infamous rooms is room 307, which is said to be haunted by 2 ghosts. The amount of paranormal activity here is very high. Visitors said that they saw children running through the halls, and some say that they've seen an angry man and a one-eyed female. There are also reports of the spirits playing the piano in the middle of the night, and others have said that their stuff was stolen. There have also been a lot of deaths that have occurred in this room. A cowboy was shot to death, and a woman was beheaded and left in a closet. So needless to say, this place has a lot of angry and vengeful spirits. Las Coches Adobe makes it onto this list at number 3. This might be one of the most terrifying places in California, and you know what's even more terrifying? The fact that I probably pronounced it wrong. This building is located on an old mine site, however it was covered up because on one horrific day, an accident occurred in the mine and about 30 workers were trapped inside. All of them lost their lives, so it's no wonder that this place is haunted. Locals and visitors have said that they heard the screams of the trapped miners echoing from the property, and there are also numerous reports of a lady in black and a male phantom walking around the grounds. Some people have even said that they've seen the ghost of a hanging man from a tree. And then we have the dark force. Locals say that this force is strong enough to throw you to the ground, and then you can feel heavy footsteps walking on your back, preventing you from getting up. There are a bunch of people who have said that they will never step foot in this place again, and I'm one of them. I don't blame them. Number 2, we have the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose. Since it was built in 1884, the mansion is said to be haunted by ghosts who were killed with Winchester rifles. Construction began in 1884 and never stopped until the owner died in 1992. The owner believed that her house was haunted by victims, and the only way to keep them quiet was to keep on building. The building was opened by the public in 1923, and the staff and the visitors have reported seeing mischievous spirits who liked to torment them. So yeah, don't be fooled by this beautiful house, because it is actually full of ugly surprises and scary ghosts lurking in every corner. But for those of you guys who are either brave or really naive, well, you can actually take a tour there and see all of the ghosts and scary paranormal activities for yourself. Alcatraz tops this list at number 1. Prisons are often the site of restless spirits and hauntings, and Alcatraz is no exception to that. This prison was the site of violent activities, and it housed some of the most dangerous criminals in the world. Alcatraz is actually a breeding ground for the paranormal. One of the most feared presence on the island is known as the Thing. This creepy spirit has red glowing eyes, and it has been recently seen by visitors and also by the prison staff when Alcatraz was in operation. Other common reportings are of creepy voices, sobbing, screaming, and the banging of cell doors. Some have even said that they felt as if they were being touched, felt cold, and they even had an emotional outburst of either sadness or anger just out of nowhere.